You know that distinct smell when a server room has not been dusted since the mid-1990s. My name is Gavin Finch. As the systems manager at Thornton Logistics, I am the invisible backbone of the company. It means nobody notices when you are watching, and you get to see how the sausage is actually made. But 3 months ago, that invisibility started to feel like a premature burial shroud. The message was from Darren Higgins, our newly appointed Director of Human Resources. Darren is the kind of guy who uses words like synergy and paradigm shift unironically while wearing a suit that costs more than my entire car. He stated in no uncertain terms that my request for a critical firewall upgrade, a security patch standing between our clients' sensitive financial data and hackers, was denied due to budgetary constraints. Budgetary constraints is corporate speak, for we spent the money on something shiny and useless. My office has a tiny angled view of the parking lot, and there it was, a brand new, slate gray Porsche Cayenne. Stepping out of the vehicle was Clarissa Thornton, the wife of our chief executive officer, Julian Thornton. I knew for a fact that Julian Thornton had been crying poverty in every town hall meeting, telling us to tighten our belts while checking his gold watch. I took a drag from my vaporizer and pulled up the procurement logs on my terminal. Buried under a generic vendor code, usually reserved for hardware maintenance, I found a charge from Stuttgart Logistics for a server rack expansion. They listed a Porsche Cayenne as a server rack expansion. I guess in the chief executive officer's mind, a car has wheels and a computer dashboard, so it qualifies as information technology infrastructure. My blood started to boil. But Julian Thornton's wife needed heated seats and a premium sound system. Underneath a tangled pile of old cables, I kept a red notebook. It was a spiral-bound, college-ruled notebook. Digital files can be wiped, but a physical notebook is forever. But this Porsche was the whale. I wrote the date, the invoice number, and asset tag 00459, Porsche Cayenne, allocated to server maintenance for Clarissa Thornton. He closed the book. The tattered red notebook was the most dangerous object in the building. Darren Higgins, the human resources wonder boy, started hovering around my department looking for inefficiencies to justify his own salary. I just smiled and quietly cataloged my ammunition. "We need to be leaner, Gavin," Darren said one afternoon, leaning against my door frame and checking his reflection in the glass of the server rack. I looked at him, then at his expensive haircut, and thought about the Porsche. We think competence protects us, forgetting that to a parasite, the host is just a resource to be drained until it collapses. I spent the weekend preparing for war. I backed up my personal emails and synced critical files to an encrypted cloud drive that the company firewall could not touch. Nothing says sacrifice like lukewarm delivery pizza while discussing layoffs. I stood in the back of the atrium near the exit, always keeping an eye on the escape routes. Julian Thornton stood on the stage, wearing a tailored suit that shimmered under the harsh fluorescent lights. Then Darren Higgins took the microphone, and the atmosphere in the room shifted from boring corporate talk to something much colder. I was about to be made an example of to terrify the remaining staff. "We have to address some cultural issues within our organization," Darren said, his voice amplified by the speakers my team had set up just an hour prior. "Let us talk about the information technology department," Darren continued, letting the words hang in the air. Specifically, the refusal to adapt to modern budgeting strategies and the constant pushback against executive decisions. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Julian Thornton stood behind Darren, his arms crossed, looking like a disappointed father who had just found contraband in his child's drawer. "Gavin Finch," Darren said, looking directly at me with a fake smile. "We have discussed the firewall upgrades, but in corporate land, stating a negative fact is an act of treason." "It is insubordination," Darren continued, his voice rising for theatrical effect. I looked at Darren, who was practically preening on stage, waiting for me to break. "You can leave your badge at the front desk," Darren said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. In high-stress situations, time slows down. Adrenaline dumps into your bloodstream, and the world turns into a high-definition movie. I saw the sweat bead on Julian Thornton's upper lip. I saw a piece of green herb stuck in the receptionist's teeth, and I saw a man in a gray suit standing near the water cooler. He was holding a clipboard and looking incredibly bored. He was an auditor, an external forensic accountant. Management must have brought him in to justify the restructuring and rubber stamp their financial lies. A sudden calm washed over me. It was cold and clear. If I was going to be executed, I might as well pull the pin on the grenade in my pocket. Incompetence, I said. My voice was not loud, but the atrium was so quiet that the word carried clearly to the stage. Darren blinked. Excuse me? You said I was being terminated for incompetence regarding the budget, I said. Stepping away from the wall, I started walking toward the front of the room, but not toward the stage. I walked toward the auditor. Gavin, this is not a debate, Darren snapped, his smile vanishing. The two security guards took a hesitant step forward. I shot them a look, the stern look I used when they tried to bypass the web filter, and they froze. I kept walking, my shoes clicking on the floor. It was the sound of a clock ticking down. I reached into my bag and pulled out the red notebook. It looked pathetic, with its bent spiral binding and peeling cover, but it was the diary of a man who had watched the company's financial honesty decay. I stopped right in front of the auditor. He looked up, startled. You are the forensic auditor, correct? I asked. He nodded slowly and said his name was Simon Albright. Mr. Albright, I said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. I am being fired for managing the IT budget incorrectly. I think you should see the actual budget of this company before you sign off on their reports. Gavin, Julian Thornton shouted from the stage, his paternal mask completely shattered. That notebook is company property. You are unauthorized to present any proprietary documents to external parties. I ignored him and handed the book to Simon Albright. It is a personal logbook, I told him. My handwriting, my daily observations. But the invoice numbers and vendor codes are entirely real. You can look them up in the active database, assuming they have not been deleted yet. Simon Albright took the book. He looked at it with the mild disgust one might show to a wet newspaper, but he opened it. Gavin, step away from the auditor immediately, Darren said, scrambling down the stage stairs with a flushed face. This is harassment. Page 42, I told Simon Albright. Start there. The auditor flipped the pages. The room was paralyzed. 80 people held their breath. Even the hum of the vending machines seemed to die down. Simon Albright found page 42. He adjusted his glasses. He read the entry. He paused, he squinted. Then he stopped looking at the tattered red book and looked up at the chief executive officer on the stage. The bored look was gone, replaced by deep confusion. Mr. Thornton, Simon Albright said, his voice dry and paper-like. Julian Thornton froze. This is just a disgruntled employee, Mr. Albright. Do not waste your time with his fabrications. Mr. Thornton, the auditor repeated. Why is there an entry here, cross-referenced with a hardware invoice from Stuttgart Logistics that lists a luxury Porsche Cayenne under server maintenance? The silence that followed was a total vacuum. You could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets. I looked at Darren, whose face had gone the color of spoiled milk. I looked at Julian Thornton, who looked like he was trying to calculate the flight time to a non-extradition country. I turned around and walked out of the atrium. I did not look back. I could hear the murmur starting behind me, a low rumble that was about to turn into a corporate landslide. I walked past the receptionist, past the security guards, and out into the hallway. My hands were still shaking, but it was from the sheer rush of dropping a bomb into the lap of the man who had tried to destroy me. I made it to my closet office. I had about 10 minutes before they terminated my system access. I sat down at my keyboard, my fingers flying. I did not steal any data. That would be illegal. I simply ensured that my personal logs were secure, and I executed a small script I had written months ago. It was a dead man's switch on the logging database. If anyone attempted to delete the transaction history for the past 3 years, the database would automatically archive the files to a read-only partition and email a copy to the board. It was my insurance policy. A moment later, my screen read access denied. They had pulled the plug. It did not matter. The seed was planted. I grabbed my framed photo of my dog, my stash of emergency chocolate, and my coat and walked out into the parking lot. I sat in my old sedan, watching the building. The air conditioning in my car blew hot air, but I did not care. Usually, an all-hands meeting lasted at least an hour. This one ended 12 minutes after I walked out. The heavy double doors burst open, and employees streamed out, phones pressed to their ears and thumbs flying across screens. The corporate pizza party was officially over. My phone buzzed. It was a text message from Toby Jenkins, my junior systems administrator. Toby was 22, wore anime t-shirts to meetings, and was a genius with database queries. He wrote, "Oh my God, Gavin, the CEO is screaming at the accountant. Darren is literally crying in the hallway. They kicked everyone out of the building. What was in that notebook?" I smiled and texted back, "Just the system specifications, Toby. Just the specifications." I drove to a quiet dive bar down the street. It was 11 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the place smelled of bleach and old wood. I ordered a whiskey sour. The bartender, an older man named Barnaby, did not even blink. "Rough morning?" he asked. "The best morning of my life, Barnaby," I replied. I think I had just fired my boss. "Cheers to that," he grunted. While I drank, I thought about the red notebook. Fraud always starts small. It starts with an executive dinner that includes 3 bottles of expensive wine. Then it is a business trip to Las Vegas where the actual work lasts 1 hour, and the networking lasts 3 days at the card tables. And when nobody stops them, they get brave and stupid. The Porsche was just the tip of the iceberg. The server rack expansion was bold, but the cloud storage project on page 56 was my favorite. They had billed the company $45,000 for off-site storage. The registered address for the vendor was a residential house in Florida owned by Darren Higgins's mother. Unless his mother was running an enterprise data center in her sunroom next to her plants, that money was gone. I knew Simon Albright would find that one next. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Clara, the receptionist. She texted, "Security just locked down the executive wing. I can hear the shredders running from the lobby. It sounds like a giant rodent chewing on cardboard." I took a sip of my drink. Shredding paper is an amateur move. You can shred invoices, but you cannot shred a digital footprint unless you know exactly where to look. And the only person who knew the map of that network was currently sitting in a dive bar eating peanuts. I realized then that I had crossed a line. Whistleblowers do not get nice severance packages. They get lawsuits. I needed to protect myself. I opened my personal laptop, a heavy machine running a secure operating system, and connected to the bar's network. I logged into my bank, moved my modest savings to a completely separate financial institution, and changed all my passwords. Then I saw a notification, a login attempt on my personal cloud drive. The source network address was the executive subnet back at the office. They were trying to break into my personal files to see what else I had. They were guessing obvious passwords. It was desperate. I executed a script I had prepared for this exact scenario. It was a digital honeypot, a folder labeled executive compensation files. If they clicked it, the folder would not open. Instead, it would execute a script that locked their computer screen and blared a ridiculous carnival tune at maximum volume for 5 minutes. I watched the log. The file was accessed and the script executed. Somewhere in that executive suite, Darren or Julian was currently staring at a frozen computer screen while clown music blasted out of their speakers. I laughed. "You are in a good mood," Barnaby said, cleaning the counter. "I just pictured a very greedy man falling into a pool of custard," I told him. "Classic," he agreed, but my smile faded. The lawyers would be next. Julian Thornton was a cornered animal, and cornered animals bite. I needed a lawyer of my own, a real specialist in corporate whistleblowing. I spent the next hour researching, bookmarking the names of attorneys who dealt with financial fraud. My phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. I answered it. "Gavin, this is Donald Abernathy," a voice said. The tone was smooth, professional, and entirely hostile. "I represent Thornton Logistics. I am calling to demand the immediate return of all company property currently in your possession." "I do not have any company property, Donald," I replied. "I left my badge and my laptop at the office." "We are referring to the red logbook, Gavin," Abernathy said, "and we are referring to the confidentiality agreement you signed in 2008. If you share that proprietary information with any unauthorized third parties, we will file a lawsuit for significant damages. We will go after your home, your pension, and your future." "Is that a threat, Donald?" I asked. "It is a reality check," the lawyer replied. "Bring the notebook to the office by 5 this afternoon, and we are prepared to offer you 6 months of salary as a severance package with a neutral reference. If you refuse, we will ruin you 6 months of salary." It was a tempting offer for a split second. The tired part of my brain, The part that wanted to pay my mortgage and sleep through the night wanted to take it. I could find another job. I could walk away. But then I realized that if I took the deal, they would win. They would keep the Porsche, keep the shell companies, and fire my team anyway. "Donald," I said slowly, "you can take your severance package and shove it. I do not have the book anymore. I gave it to a friend." "What friend?" the lawyer demanded, his composure cracking. "His name is Simon Albright," I said. "I believe he is currently auditing your client's accounts." I hung up. I blocked the number. My hands were shaking, but this time it was from determination. I walked out of the bar, knowing that the battle had officially begun. I spent the afternoon in my apartment, which I call Mission Control. It is a modest two-bedroom place, but the second bedroom is filled with monitors and hardware. I logged into my network backdoor, the ghost account I had created years ago. I had built it to patch servers from home without waiting for executive approval, but now it was my window into the collapse. The dashboard was lit up with red alerts. Darren Higgins was trying to execute delete commands on the human resources directories and the chief financials directories, and the tempting financial officer was attempting to wire transfer records from 2022, but every single command was being blocked. Simon Albright had successfully initiated a legal hold, locking the system. In the eyes of the law, any attempt to destroy these records now constituted active spoliation of evidence, a severe violation that would make any future defense void ab initio. I watched the messages flying back and forth. The chief executive officer was sending frantic emails to Donald Abernathy, while Darren was emailing Julian about renovations. I remembered page 62 of my book, Office Improvement, 3rd floor, $80,000. Our building only had 2 floors. Darren had recently remodeled his home kitchen, and now I knew who had paid for the marble countertops. A new system broadcast went out to all staff. IT department, performing emergency physical audits. Please surrender your laptops immediately. They were trying to collect the machines to scrub the hard drives manually. I could have stopped them by sending a command to lock all devices, but that would have ruined the work of innocent employees. Instead, I sent an encrypted message to Toby Jenkins, telling him to remove his hard drive and claim it had crashed. Toby replied that Darren was sweating through his suit, walking down the cubicle rows with a cardboard box, while Simon Albright followed him with a notepad, writing down every single thing he did. It was a beautiful image. Then my connection went dead. The ghost account was terminated. Either they had found the account or Simon Albright had disabled it to protect me from being accused of unauthorized access. I sat back in my chair. The digital link was gone, but the trap was already sprung. At 7 in the evening, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Evelyn Ross, Julian Thornton's executive assistant. She had treated me like a servant for 10 years, but tonight she looked terrified. She was holding a bottle of champagne and a thick manila envelope. I opened the door. "Gavin," she said, her voice trembling. "Can I come in? I need to show you something." I let her in, and she sat on my couch, clutching the envelope. She looked exhausted, the polished corporate facade completely gone. "Julian did not send me," Evelyn said, taking a nervous sip of the cheap wine from her glass. "Julian is currently locked in his office, trying to shred documents manually. The shredder keeps jamming because he is feeding it too fast. He is panicking, Gavin. He is calling fixers. And I am the one who has had to cover for him for years. I am the one who books the flights, coordinates the meetings, and lies to his wife when he is at a luxury hotel with a 20-year-old consultant." She opened the envelope, revealing photos, hotel receipts, and copies of personal checks. "I kept my own records," she whispered. "Not financial like yours, but the personal stuff. The apartment lease is paid for by the company, the jewelry, invoices, even a paternity test from 3 years ago. I wanted to protect myself. Now I want to see them go down for how they treated us." Her records combined with my red notebook were a devastating combination. The financial fraud was clear, but the personal misconduct proved a total breach of fiduciary duty to the board. While we were looking through the papers, my laptop chimed. It was an email from the board of directors, sent via Donald Abernathy. The subject was Proposal for Independent Consulting Agreement. They were offering to hire me as an external consultant at a rate of $250 an hour with a $20,000 upfront retainer to assist in the audit. The catch was the final paragraph. I had to sign a strict non-disclosure agreement covering all past and future findings. They wanted to buy my silence and use my technical knowledge to bury the worst of the evidence before the authorities got involved. They want to buy you, Evelyn said, looking at the screen. They want you to help them hide the bodies. $250 an hour was a massive amount of money. It was more than double my old salary. I could pay off my debt, fix my car, and live comfortably. But the non-disclosure agreement meant I would be complicit in their cover-up. I hit reply. My message read, "My consulting rate is $500 an hour. My retainer is $50,000. Regarding the non-disclosure agreement, I refuse. I will assist Mr. Albright in finding the truth, but I will not help you hide it. I will see you in the morning, and I will bring donuts." I hit send. Evelyn stared at me. "You just turned down $20,000 to tell them to go to hell?" she asked. "No," I replied, opening the champagne she had brought. "I just told them that my integrity is not for sale." The next morning, I put on a decent blazer and drove to the office. The security gate was down, and my badge was deactivated. I pressed the intercom. The security guard, Otis, answered. "Gavin, I cannot let you in," he said. "You are on the banned list." "Otis," I replied. "I am here to see Simon Albright. If you do not let me in, I will tell the auditors about the time you accidentally backed the company delivery van into a light pole and blamed it on a hit and run." There was a long silence, and then the gate lifted. "Thanks, Otis," I said. I parked and walked into the building. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. Employees were whispering in small groups, and the receptionist, Clara, gave me a subtle thumbs up as I walked past. I went up to the second floor. The glass doors of the executive suite were open, and the office was filled with people. It looked like a moving company had arrived, but the people carrying the boxes were wearing windbreakers with federal badges on them. The FBI had arrived. I found Simon Albright in the main conference room, which he had converted into an audit war room. My red notebook sat in the center of the table like a piece of evidence. He looked exhausted but victorious. "Gavin, you are here," he said. "The board accepted your terms. No non-disclosure agreement, and they agreed to your hourly rate. We need your help to decrypt the transaction logs." "Where is the chief executive officer?" I asked. "In handcuffs," Simon Albright replied, pointing toward the corner office. I looked through the glass and saw Julian Thornton being led out by two agents. He looked shrunken, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face filled with confusion. He looked at me, and I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast. "Drive safe, Julian," I murmured. Darren Higgins was sitting in the adjacent office, crying and babbling to an agent about the hot tub and the boat. The boat was a new detail. In his panic to save himself, Darren had confessed that Julian Thornton had purchased a luxury boat and listed it as marine logistics research for $250,000. The entire executive suite was a crime scene. We spent the next 6 hours going through the digital files. With my ghost account access restored, we uncovered a network of fraud that went far deeper than the Porsche. There were phantom employees on the payroll, whose salaries were being routed to offshore bank accounts, and vendor rebates that were actually personal kickbacks to the chief financial officer, who had apparently fled the country on a medical leave that morning. The board of directors appointed an interim chief executive officer, a woman named Eleanor Stone. She had short gray hair, wore sharp suits, and did not care about corporate buzzwords. She was there to save the company from collapsing. On her second day, she called me into her office, which had been cleared of Julian's personal belongings. "Gavin," she said, "Simon Albright tells me you are the only reason we have a database left to audit. You know where the records are. I want to offer you your old job back as Director of Information Technology, with double your previous salary and full autonomy to rebuild the network." I looked around the room. I thought about the 15 years I had spent in the closet office, being ignored and treated as an expense rather than an asset. "No, thank you," I replied. Eleanor Stone blinked. "Excuse me? I do not want to be an employee here," I explained. "The corporate culture is toxic and the walls are stained with years of greed. You can clean the books, but you cannot scrub the building. I want to remain an external consultant. I will charge $500 an hour to fix your network, and then I will go home." She studied me for a long moment, realizing that I had all the leverage. "Very well," she said. contractor status. But you must sign an agreement for the future work. I will sign an agreement for the new work, I said. But the past stays in my red notebook. She sighed and agreed. I walked out of the office, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. I was no longer a servant to a corporate machine. I was an independent professional, and my rate was $500 an hour. I walked past Darren's empty office, picked up a cheap stress ball from his desk that read Thornton Logistics. We deliver excellence, and tossed it into the trash can. I updated my profile online to read, founder of Red Book Consulting, specializing in forensic cleanup and executive vehicle disposal. The final act did not take place in a court, but in the main boardroom 3 months later. The holding company from New York had called a meeting to discuss asset recovery, and I was invited to testify before the major investors. Julian Thornton was there, out on bail, sitting at the end of the long table. He looked small, gray, and completely broken. I walked in wearing jeans and a casual t-shirt, completely ignoring the formal dress code. I was charging them for my travel time, so I did not care. "Mr. Finch," the chairman of the board said, a stern man who looked like he was carved from stone. "Thank you for your assistance. Mr. Albright's report shows that your record saved the company millions of dollars in potential fines. But we have one final discrepancy. A sum of $500,000 was withdrawn in cash over 5 years. Mr. Thornton claims he does not remember where it went, and we cannot trace cash. Was there another shell company? Another partner in the fraud?" They all looked at Julian Thornton. He kept his eyes on the table, his shoulders trembling. I knew exactly where that cash had gone. 2 weeks ago, while decrypting the executive archive, I had found a hidden folder labeled The Fix. It contained records of a child Julian had fathered with a former employee in 2015, and he had been paying the mother off in cash to keep the matter quiet. If I revealed this to the board, the records would become public. His family would be destroyed, his children would bear the shame, and his wife would take whatever assets he had left. Julian looked up at me. His eyes were wide, filled with a desperate, pleading terror. The man who had denied my security patch, the man who had let Darren fire me in front of the entire company, was begging me for mercy. I thought about the years of being ignored. I thought about the cold arrogance of his leadership, and then I thought about his children who were innocent of their father's crimes. "The cash was spent on personal entertainment," I said slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on Julian. "High-stakes card games, sports betting, and luxury travel. It was entirely cash, and there is no digital trail." The room let out a collective sigh. The chairman shook his head in disgust. "Gambling pathetic. Very well, we will add the amount to our civil recovery suit." Julian slumped back in his chair, letting out a breath he had been holding for 3 months. He mouthed a silent thank you to me. I did not smile. I did not thank him back. I had not saved him out of kindness. I had saved his family, but in doing so, I had ensured that I owned his secret forever. He would spend the rest of his life knowing that his freedom from total public disgrace was held in the hands of the IT manager he had tried to step on. I stood up and left the boardroom. I walked out of the building and into the warm afternoon sun. I got into my old sedan, and the engine started on the first try. I drove home, sat on my couch, and opened a cold bottle of beer. My phone buzzed with a bank notification. The $50,000 retainer had been deposited into my account. I smiled, taking a sip. Then my phone buzzed again, this time with a social media notification. It was a video posted by a local college student named Wyatt. He was wearing a vintage military jacket with a distinct patch on the sleeve. I recognized it instantly. It was my father's old military jacket, which Julian's wife had accidentally taken from the office charity drive 3 years ago. The caption read, "Vintage find. Fits like a king." I stared at the screen. The war was over, but perhaps there was still some digital cleaning left to do. I opened my laptop and cracked my knuckles. "Okay, Wyatt," I whispered to the empty room. "Let us see if your tax returns are as authentic as that jacket." I took another sip of my beer. The network was clean, the bad guys were gone, and for the first time in 15 years, the server room hummed with a perfect, steady beat.